When he dresses like that, it's not an accident. He's kicking authority in the balls.
And all your stupid little fake tattoos, it's a costume.
This race between Mehmet Oz and John Fetterman for U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania has to be one of the most entertaining races I have ever covered. And a big reason for that is because of how clownish Dr. Oz is. And of course, I have another new example. This time, Dr. Oz accidentally gave John Fetterman a massive compliment without even realizing it. And later on in this video, I'll get to the genesis of that idea that Dr. Oz used to try and criticize Fetterman, having to do with something that Tucker Carlson said. And I'll also get to Fetterman's firing back at Tucker over that as well. So a lot to get to in this video. But first, here are the comments that Dr. Oz made to a conservative podcast called Ruthless in an attempt to try and criticize Fetterman over what he wears, yet accidentally compliments him.
I want to push back on the costume a little bit because it's an interesting phenomenon. I was stunned by it as well. But it turns out that if you're a far left radical with the belief that this country is irredeemably stained, you just want to break it apart. Just bust America, crack it to its base, break it asunder, and rebuild it with your toxic ideology. That's what he stands for. When he dresses like that, it's not an accident. He's kicking authority in the balls.
Yeah.
He said, hey, I'm the man. I'll show those guys who's boss. I'm going to not allow any traditional path to succeed. Because by breaking some parts of it down, I can break it all down. That's the deeper message he's delivering.
Okay, so in a bit, I will get to the origin of this criticism, and then Fetterman's reaction to Tucker in that case as well. But here, all of this was insane. Like, the vast majority of this made no sense at all, but I'll attempt to break some of it down. But just up front here, John Fetterman kicking authority in the balls. Is that supposed to make him less appealing? How do you not realize you are helping your opponent here? Unless Dr. Oz really wants to lose this race. I mean, it shows you how disconnected he is. That he thinks voters want someone to get in there and just not challenge anyone, not do anything, just bow their head to authority. Authority in Washington clearly being money and politics, the billions poured into these elections. Dr. Oz thinks that voters want someone who's going to get in there and just bow their head to the money. I'll get to some polling on that in a second, but I shouldn't have to get to polling on that. It's obvious. No, this makes Fetterman look much cooler, much more appealing. He's so disconnected. It is insane, but it makes sense considering how wealthy Mehmet Oz is. But let's break down these comments, okay? So he says this is a costume that Oz also says is an interesting phenomenon. I don't even know how you can claim any of this is a phenomenon. This is, if you look up John Fetterman's name, just do a simple Google image search. This is how he's always dressed. There's like a couple images of him wearing a suit, but the vast majority of is him this is how he's always dressed. He's always dressed casually. A costume implies that you are putting on a look to try and have a certain appeal, to try and be something that you are not. But this is Fetterman. I would argue that wearing a suit and tie to pretend you're a serious person is more of a costume than what John Fetterman is doing. And clearly, Dr. Oz is the clown here who is taking off his clown suit to put on a suit and tie, but also calls Fetterman a far-left radical, believes the country is irredeemably stained, yet doesn't reference anything that Fetterman has done to imply that. And why would he be running for U.S. Senate if he thought there was no hope for any change at all? Not to mention, Fetterman's entire platform is about what he wants to see done, what he would support, the changes he wants to see implemented. Meanwhile, the Republican line, their entire platform is just anti this, anti that, anti this. There are no actual ideas to help anybody. Now, he also, just more of this, just randomness. He wants to crack America to its base. Again, if you go back and listen to this entire clip, it's just all nothing. It's just, filling it's words to fill sentences that makes absolutely no sense. Wants to crack America to its base. Like, let's pretend Fetterman wants to crack America to its base. Let's pretend that's a thing that you can do. How is one U.S. senator going to crack America to its base? Again, none of this makes any sense, but it's an attempt here to try and fearmonger. And now I just want to show you some reaction first, which if you go and, so this is the initial clip here. If you check out the quote tweets or the responses to it, they're all basically saying, what the hell is Dr. Oz doing? And they're all in support of Fetterman here. So this is Mrs. Betty Bowers saying, I wonder if John Fetterman will give Dr. Oz credit for his new campaign slogan, kicking authority in the balls. Fetterman, I hope, in some way uses that clip because it only helps him. Another reaction here from Eric. Americans have been running for office for 250 years, and never before has one been so lucky as to have their opponent denounce them for kicking authority in the balls. This from Megan. I lived in Central PA for 2 years. Kicking authority in the balls is kind of a favorite pastime there. Hell, even in New Jersey, it's a frequent activity. Oz is the epitome of the man. Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, in terms of, again, what I was discussing earlier, what the authority in Washington is, money and politics, you look at people's feelings on this, and it is clear across the board, regardless of how they vote, regardless of ideology. This is a poll taken in 2016. As the race begins, 84% of Americans think money has too much influence in political campaigns now. Criticism of the role of money cuts across party lines. Large majorities of Republicans, Democrats, and independents all think money has too much influence. So you take a look here. 80% of Republicans, 90% of Democrats, and 84% of independents all think money has too much influence in politics. Going on, they say most Americans see widespread problems with how election campaigns are funded in the U.S. 46% think the system for funding political campaigns has so much wrong with it that it needs to be rebuilt completely. And another 39% think that while there are good things in the system, fundamental changes are needed. Just 13% of Americans think only minor changes are needed. So this goes to the point of, Dr. Oz claiming that voters don't want someone who's going to change the system. Yet here, 46% think the system for funding campaigns needs to be rebuilt completely. And another almost 40% think that while there are good things, fundamental changes are needed. So they want somebody who's going to kick authority in the balls. They want someone to go in there and say, I'll show those guys who's boss. They don't want a Dr. Oz. But again, Dr. Oz completely disconnected. More polling here. I mean, I can go on forever, but this is an Ipsos poll, also back in 2016. A majority say 93% their views are left out of the political process. So an overwhelming 93% believe that elected officials listen more to deep-pocketed donors than regular voters. And in this poll, actually, Republicans express more cynicism. Only 5% Republicans believe regular voters are heard more by their elected leaders. So again, this not only helps Fetterman with, independents and Democrats, it also helps him with Republican voters as well, who are also aware of the influence that money in politics has, though they clearly maybe are voting the wrong way. But to be fair, both parties are heavily engaged in this. There are only really a handful of Democrats that have removed themselves from this aspect of the system. Also, I mean, again, I can go on all day. But yes, most Americans want to limit campaign spending. Okay. Every poll, I mean, I'm bored by this stuff because it is so obvious to me. I'm sure you are at this point as well. So, but just look up money in politics, polling. You will see how voters feel about it. All right. I'm going to get to just a couple Fetterman points here before I get to the Tucker piece. So he tweets out, again, showing you what Fetterman is in support in, how our nation's minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is truly shitty, and showcases this stat here, that the wage today would be over $22 per hour had it tracked productivity increases over the last 5 decades. So again, he supports raising the wage, showcasing here how insanely low it is currently. And also on the issue of kicking authority in the balls, the Supreme Court, also another authority that is out of step with the vast majority of people. Fetterman actually supports abortion rights. Meanwhile, Dr. Oz does not. Dr. Oz's attempted defense here is that he wants to leave it to the states. Well, you leave it to the states. Look at West Virginia. Lawmakers there approved near total abortion ban. Also shows another example here. University of Idaho employees were warned Friday that they could be charged with a felony for talking about abortion because of how insane the abortion laws are there. Now, let's get to Tucker, because this is, you will notice, if you pay close attention to this stuff, a lot of these ideas tend to come from Tucker Carlson. They see him as the most watched cable news anchor, and they take these ideas out and use them for their own campaign. The problem is, Oz took out maybe the worst idea that Tucker's ever given out there, and that is of this idea of the costume that Fetterman wears. So I'm going to get to what Tucker said and then Fetterman's reaction to it.
And by the way, only rich kids wear hoodies to political events. Oh, I'm a working man, I'm wearing a hoodie. No working man actually wears a hoodie to a political event. Oh, your stupid little fake tattoos. It's a costume, of course.
All right, I'm going to get to Fetterman firing back at this insanity in a second here. First, the idea of Tucker Carlson calling someone else a rich kid is just amazing. The audacity. I mean, Tucker Carlson is worth $420 million. He has 13 real estate properties, 11 luxury cars, and 6 yachts. He's trying to call Fetterman a rich kid? And no, Tucker didn't earn this all himself. Carlson is the son of Dick Carlson, a media executive who used to direct The Voice of America and is a former CEO of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Tucker also went to Rhode Island private school, St. George's, and later attended Trinity College. So Tucker, a very wealthy upbringing. His father also married the heir to the Swanson dinner fortune. So Tucker's set to inherit even more money, yet he is calling someone else a rich kid because Fetterman wore a hoodie, because Fetterman wears hoodies to political events. Tucker is the one of the most, he is the most dishonest person in media. This image he tries to portray of him being the everyman, he's standing up for the working class guy, is such garbage. Yet he continues being the number one in news, partly because largely the demographics that watch cable news skew much older, not to offend anyone who is a lot brighter than, the vast majority of your generation, but goddamn, he is completely full of shit. But now let's get to Fetterman's reaction. So Fetterman fired back at Tucker over the tattoo insults. In a piece on NBC, he wrote, "I have 9 dates tattooed on my right forearm. Each one is a day on which someone died violently in Braddock, Pennsylvania, while I was mayor. Gun violence and violent crime might be jokes to someone like Carlson, but they are very real to people in towns like Braddock. My decision to mark these deaths with tattoos was inspired in part by their permanence, the fact that these people, their stories, and my town will be with me forever. I get that etching art permanently onto your body isn't how most politicians would express their connection to their communities, but I didn't care about what anyone else thought. It felt right to me." So this is how Fetterman expresses himself. These tattoos, how he dresses, this is who he is. Conservatives like Carlson pretend that they are about freedom. Yet when somebody, in their mind, steps out of line, looks a little differently, has these tattoos, wears hoodies, oh, this person's crazy, they're weird, you can't trust them. What happened to freedom? Their freedom is just freedom to be what we say you can be. It's the line around freedom is one of the biggest lies in politics. How it's used by conservatives, one of the most bullshit lines that have ever been used in these arguments, because they are not for freedom. They're for assimilation. They're for doing what they want you to do, and that's it. Anyways, quickly here. This race is getting tighter, and it's because Oz is now getting a lot of money from big donors, pouring it into this race and television ads. He is spending more on TV now, and that has now narrowed the race a little bit here. So even though Fetterman at one point was up by like 12 points, 11 points, it's now a 7.1 percentage gap. So Fetterman's still up big, but as I say in most of these videos covering this race is not over. Even though Fetterman is clearly the better candidate, clearly the only one here that actually understands the working class, actually has a record of fighting for the working class, it doesn't matter. If you are going to paint television and radio with your ads, and the vast amount of voters are skew older, they're the ones that are hearing this stuff, that are being affected by this stuff, you have to have a high voter turnout in terms of especially younger voters coming out to vote to be able to get past a lot of that garbage. So even though Fetterman clearly is still winning here, this race, as I said, is not over. Understand that if you are in Pennsylvania, you have to be engaged in a variety of ways. Engage your family, engage your friends, and ensure that on voting day, people actually go out to vote.